morning, Year 5. Today in our English lesson, we are going to look at some punctuation, so do some work on colons. So I'm just going to get onto my slides. So before we begin the lesson, we would just like you to have a go at this starter. So describe what you can see in this image using the following word categories. So for bronze, you'll be looking at nouns. For silver, nouns and verbs. And for gold, nouns, verbs and adjectives. And there are some examples of each in those instructions there. You can have a look at the challenge in your own time. So if you would like some guidance on how to lay your starter activity out, you could lay it out as a grid like this. Have a go at this, and when you're ready to move on, press play. So as I already mentioned, we're going to be looking at how to use a colon. So I'd just like you to spend 30 seconds to think about how do you already know, what use do you already know about when it comes to using a colon. And if you have time, or if you would like to, have a go at the challenge, which is to use one within a sentence. So when you're ready to move on, press play. So as I'm sure many of you have already thought of, a colon can be used to introduce a list. So for example, the lost thing has, colon, an immense metal body, semicolon, long muscular limbs, semicolon, scarlet spikes emanating from its top, and multiple doors covering its metal shell. So in this instance, a colon has been used to introduce a list. But today we're going to be looking at using a colon before an explanation. A colon can be used to separate two independent clauses when the second clause explains or elaborates the first clause. For example, the lost thing was enormous. It was 10 times the size of the average human being. There's a colon there after enormous. So just take a few moments to have a go at the challenge. What punctuation is this similar to? How is it different? When you're ready to move on, press play. So as I'm sure a lot of you have thought already, that it's a similar use to how we might use the semicolon, which we would also use to separate two clauses. But when we use a semicolon, the two clauses are more vaguely connected to each other. When we use a colon to connect two clauses, they are very closely connected, and the second clause explains the first clause. But I'll go into more detail about this as we go through the lesson. So let's have a look at our rules. There's our example there, our example sentence. Rules. There needs to be two independent clauses, and the second main clause needs to explain or to elaborate on the first main clause. And elaborate means to go into more detail about something. So let's have a quick recap. What is an independent clause? Well, an independent clause is a clause that can stand on its own. So if we look at our previous example, the thing was enormous. That's its sentence on its own, and an independent or main clause always has a noun, which would be thing in this example, and a verb, which would be was in this example. Now, in the next few slides, we're just going to have a go at writing sentences using a colon in this way. So the first slide shows you an example of the activity and how it is done. So step 1, create a simple main clause. For example, the sea lapped at the shore. Step 2, create a second main clause. It has to expand upon the information in the first clause. Its turquoise waves invited people to paddle. And step 3, join the sentences together. Remember to replace the full stop with a colon and remove the capital letter. The sea lapped at the shore. Its turquoise waves invited people to paddle. So I'm just going to have a go at modelling that for you now. So step 1, create a simple main clause. Sean peered into the distance. Full stop. He could just make out the outline of a strange creature. Full stop. So we've got our first simple main clause, we've got our second main clause which explains the information in the first, or expands upon the information in the first, and now we're going to join those two clauses together. Sean peered into the distance. I'm going to replace my full stop with a colon. I'm going to remove my capital letter. He could just make out the outline of a strange creature. Full stop. Now, on the next two slides, there is an opportunity for you to have a go yourselves at doing that activity. So when you're ready to, when you've done it twice and when you're ready to move on, press play. So did you replace the full stop with a colon? Did you remember your capital letter? Before we do our main activities, I would just like you to have a final a go at this final activity. So what have you learned? Is the colon correct or incorrect in these sentences? And your challenge is to explain your answer and complete this before moving on to the next page for the answers. So in the first sentence, they enjoyed lazing on the beach. He doesn't like swimming. This is incorrect because the two clauses do not relate to each other in meaning. The next sentence, I enjoyed my swim this morning. The sea, colon, felt lovely. The colon should come after morning to separate the two clauses. So this is incorrect. Posters covered the walls. You couldn't see the brick beneath. This is correct because the two independent clauses are separated by a colon, and the second explains or elaborates the first clause. And finally, clouds floated through the sky. They formed swirling patterns as they streaked across. This one is correct because, like the previous one, there are two independent clauses. They are separated by a colon, and the second clause explains or elaborates the first clause. So well done at having a go at those ones. So I'm now going to talk you through the different tasks. So for bronze, there is a resource available on the school's website for you to have a look at. Put a colon in the correct place in the sentences, and once you've completed, move on to silver. For example, the lost thing felt happy. He had been found, and you would need to look, you would need to put in a colon there. So it was already done for you, but I'm just going to put it in. There we go. Add a second clause explaining or elaborating the first clause. Sean felt curious, and then you would need to add a second clause which explains or elaborates the first one. So what was this strange thing? For gold, complete silver, and then write 5 of your own sentences to express Sean and the lost thing's feelings, using a colon to separate clauses. And then you can have a read through the challenge in your own time. Make sure you complete bronze before moving on to the next slide, because on the next slide there are the answers for bronze. And finally, when you have finished your tasks, we would like you to have a go at completing the reflection shape. Okay, thank you very much, Year 5. Have a lovely day. Bye.